This week we're working on a sliding Deadman because it's much more practical than rolling a Deadman when it comes to work holding. The Wood Night is sponsored by I Would Like. Before I somewhat permanently attach the workbench tops to the base, I want to route this groove here. This will be for the sliding Deadman. I want to do this before I do any flattening and cinching down of the workbench, just because it's heavy. It could be done later and then unscrewed and flipped it back up, whatever. But this is heavy, so the fewer times I have to move it, the better. So this groove here will accept a tongue that'll be on the sliding Deadman. This will keep it nice and straight, so it's parallel with the workbench legs. There'll be a track on the lower rail. If we only had the track, it would tend to fall over. So this will act as a guide for it, for a lack of a better word. So I need to route in a nice long groove around here. It doesn't have to be particularly deep, though I am going to go about 30 millimeters down. The groove doesn't have to be particularly wide either. I'm going to make mine about 15-16 millimeters, so it's going to be 2 passes with the 1/2 inch router bit. And we want it in from the edge a little bit so we're not losing any strength there, and otherwise we would just be making a rabbit and that wouldn't work so well. So like all the other routed parts, this is just going to be the handheld router with a 1/2 inch spiral upcut bit, and using the edge guide to make my passes. So I'll do pass to full depth, adjust my fence and continue on. This is only happening on the front slab, though you could do it on both the front and back. If that's something you think you're going to use, is to sliding Deadmans. I'm not, so for now this is fine. In worst case I can always add it in down the track. You can tell I'm a pro video guy because of how well this shot of my arm is lit and composed. Remember, a good rule of thumb is to plunge no more than half the diameter of the router bit, or in this case about 6 mil per pass. Once that was routed, I could drill the clearance holes for the lag screws in the frame, then pre-drill the pilot hole in the underside of the top. When drilling the clearance hole, I clamped a scrap on the other side so there was no tear out. The clearance hole provides enough wriggle room for a seasonal expansion and contraction. I could then screw the top down using a ratcheting driver. I like to do this by hand rather than with an impact driver, as it makes me feel a bit more in control. The next little task I had was to notch out the divider. I didn't want to do this until the base was glued up. This was done at the table saw using a dado stack and crosscut sled. You can see the 2 modes it works in, flipped up to act as a stop and flipped the other way into the notches so it's flush. It's currently just slightly proud and will remain that way until I flatten the workbench. Then work on the sliding Deadman could begin. As per usual, I had to flatten one face and one edge of the 2 pieces being laminated. While I was at the jointer, I could also square up the pieces that were used for the track. While Deadman parts were in clamps, I could continue milling down the track. First I thicknessed it down, then ripped it to final width. To cut the angles on it, I tilted my saw blade to 45 degrees and used a featherboard to hold it up against the fence. I'm not just cutting out a triangle, so there will always be at least a square and flat section against the table saw fence and table. It was a fairly safe operation. Because I didn't want the absolute peak to chip off, I took a few passes with a hand plane to break the edge. By this stage, the glue had dried on the blank for the sliding Deadman, and that could be remilled down to square 4 sides. Because the sliding Deadman is thicker than the rail because of the rebate left for the shelf, the placement of the matching groove needed to be offset. If you didn't see my video on it, the saw stop miter gauge sucks, and I spent a great deal of time trying to get it working. It's gone in the bin for now. The matching tenon to go on the routed grooves was cut using the dado stack and crosscut sled. Once I had an okay fit, it was over to the drill press to drill out the holes with bench dogs and holdfasts. Here I'm using a 19mm Forstner bit, but this is a carbide tipped bit. It's incredibly fast and clean cutting. I may look at getting some more of these in the future. They have a much easier to sharpen profile if you have small diamond files. With both rows of dog holes drilled out, over at the bandsaw I cut out some curves to make it a little bit prettier. You might wonder why I started with such a large blank if I was going to cut it down, but don't forget this was construction grade hardwood that comes in 90x45 or 2x4 sizes. The track was then glued on using some painter's tape to reduce how far the squeeze out goes, and using tape as clamps. As both surfaces are jointed, very little pressure is needed to bring them to a perfect fit. So if you haven't seen a sliding Deadman, this is how it goes. It can be removed from the track quite easily. So pivots into the track in the top. I probably cut off a little bit too much of the tongue. It doesn't fit quite as well as what I'd hoped, but this is about $6 worth of material, so I can always make another one down the track. Slides back and forth very freely. And the general idea is that this isn't necessarily work holding, but work support, if that makes sense. Over here is where we'll have the leg vise. That'll do the clamping, but for longer pieces, we might need something just to hold it up. That's why there is a series of holes here for bench dogs, which can often be enough, or you can use a holdfast. This holdfast might not work so well, but there are other types, such as this, that can go in and clamp a piece in position. Veritas sell some that are a little bit more designed for this sort of use. They're small brass ones. I might end up getting some of those, we'll see. So the sliding Deadman's a little rough around the corners, but because I can remove that very easily, I'm going to leave it like that until I actually have finished the workbench. Then between either the leg vise or the dog holes, I can clamp it down and use a spoke shave to clean up the corners and make it look prettier and smooth. At the moment, with nothing to hold it down, it's just going to be a bit of a pain to do that. Next week, we're going to do one of two tasks. I haven't decided which, and it sort of depends on when some tooling arrives. I'm either going to be flattening the workbench. I've already got the flattening jig set up, but I need a collet extension for my router. Otherwise, the slab flattening bit is just not big enough, won't reach far enough down. The other thing that we may be doing is working on the leg vise. I've got the blank made up for that. Because I'll be making my own screws, there'll also be a dowel making jig video. Maybe within that video, maybe there's a separate video, I haven't decided yet. It won't be like the dowelinator, don't worry, and it won't use a lathe at all. It's the router table, and the sample 19mm dowel has worked out pretty well for the very first attempt. Subsequent tests have been a little bit better, but I still need to do a little bit more refining there. That's all for this video, so thank you for watching.